Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour. I'm your host, Matthew Hawkins, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Ed Carbajal. Ed, how is it going?
Good man. Apologies to our listeners and viewers that we were away last week. That's my bad. I gotten a buttload of work from Spectation Sports. If you're a member of the platform, there's we got links on the bottom to sign up if you want to sign up. But we had a doubleheader last week. We had an event almost every weekend. Last weekend was a doubleheader with All in Combat and another Cage Titans event. And this week, actually, we have Aries Fight Series 25 that'll have Luis Pena's return to action. He took about a year off, since he lost to Michael DeFort last year at Aries 16. So he's again fighting on Spectation Sports at Aries Fight Series 25, and I did a really good interview with him. I'm actually working on the piece. So for folks that are listening now, I do fighter features for Spectation Sports. Some of the interviews are video and accompanying the written pieces, but it's mostly written pieces, and not everything is always included. When I the interviews are always done well, but I always pull things out of the interview to write the features. But as I've done in the past, when the interviews are when I find the interviews so captivating, especially someone like Pena who's had ups and downs in his career and is making a comeback, he's a new dad. Um, I just we wound up talking for almost 20 minutes. So that conversation will be the second half of this podcast for the folks that we left hanging last week. That way you're not left hanging without some fighter content. And he is fighting this weekend against Dedrick Sanders again at Aries Fight Series 25. So it's a tough fight. But the conversation I had with Pena was great. I mean, one of the things he told me, he's trained with Bryce Mitchell to get ready for this. And one thing that wasn't on the Ultimate Fighter was that he and Bryce Mitchell go back to like middle school. They've known each other since like middle school, and they never kind of like featured that there were their friendship and stuff like that. So it's kind of like in the conversation you'll hear, he likened it to like when Rocky goes. I actually compared it to like when Rocky goes to Russia to train because he just goes hardcore to like train for Dolph Lundgren in the Rocky 4, but he likened it more to like Rocky 3, where it's like, if you remember, Rocky gets too into himself and kind of, he loses the Clubber Lang and he has to go and reassess and reevaluate and stuff like that. And he likened it more to that, to going to train with Bryce Mitchell, and then he just gave me their history and stuff like that. And I was just like, wow, man, that was an amazing story. And plus, talking about being a new dad and just his renewed interest in combat sports, I really do think it's worth listening to. So hopefully you guys enjoy it.
No, sounds like a positive story, and
Mm-hmm.
guy who's a popular fighter. I caught him in person once or twice, and obviously he was a star that came off of the Ultimate Fighter as Violent Bob Ross. So he's
Mm-hmm.
got all the tools. Extremely talented fighter whose story will be told through your interview. But yeah, definitely look forward to catching up on that. Before we get too deep in the show, I just need to say that I'm not super prepared this week. It's been a rough week for me. I've dealt with a good friend, Judy, passing away, as well as my Aunt Carol on Easter morning. So I just want to say, to them in heaven, that how much they meant to me, and that they both played big parts in my life. So love you both and miss you both. So with that said, my mind hasn't been on Twitter and a bunch of the stuff. I did catch the fights on Saturday um, night, and was able to focus on some of that stuff. So can talk about that. Obviously, we had April Fools yesterday, um, which also always brings the tweets. And my favorite April Fool's thing is the one that really happened a couple of years ago when Ferguson dropped out against Khabib. Not my favorite because of what happened, but the fact that
229.
like
Yeah.
everybody thought it was fake, and then Holloway was stepping in, and it ended up being Raging Ally Kenta stepping in. But it
Yeah.
was it was one of those things where things were moving so quick that it didn't seem real. And on
Yeah.
April Fools, there was no reason to believe it, until you got guys like, I want to say Brett Okamoto or something. It was one of those guys really was breaking it as it was happening, and he's
Mm-hmm.
going, "No, this is I'm not." BSing me.
Yeah.
This is real, and it still took till the next day to kind of really believe that one. But I always think of that one as being the most wild. But
Yeah, because it was
because
so out of this world that it wound up being true. And and I think that kind of set the tone, especially with combat sports. Every April Fools, if you guys that follow me on X, so I tweeted, don't believe anything you read today. Like, just reserve your comments and everything. I think Joaquin Buckley got people with some James Krause some James Krause comments about just making fun of like him, fixing fights again with him and Vincent, and that turned out to be an April Fool's joke, but people got caught with that one. So you got to take it with a grain of salt. I mean, just literally, I was barely on social. I think the only thing I posted was the announced fights for, because they officially, we've been it's been rumored for like months. UFC 302 is going to be in Newark and Prudential Center, which everyone kind of knew about at this point, that when hanging out that long, especially if you start seeing tickets being advertised from Ticketmaster and stuff like that, it was like, okay, we know they're going to be there. So they announced it officially while they're in Atlantic City, which was fitting because it's New Jersey. And so the only thing I posted that was actually true was the announced matchups for that card that they sent out in the press release when that was announced on the broadcast. So it's always good to have the UFC in New Jersey, despite where the money comes from, because the boardwalk,
despite it being in Newark, despite
despite the money coming from COVID relief and Governor Murphy greasing whoever's hands, and whoever's hands got grease. It's awful. It's just awful. But yeah, hopefully it's another early card in Newark.
yeah.
Antoine, good seeing you. Good to hear from you, rather.
Um, yeah, so 302, um,
In
300s
June.
obviously next
Mhm.
week, which we'll have a ton to talk about on that fight card. That might be one we have to break down from start to finish, considering I don't know where to start or really finish on the card.
Yeah,
Uh,
there's fights on the undercard there that I want to get into, but yeah, we'll save that for next week, because that'll be a big podcast.
um, but getting back to April Fools, we it's funny because you messaged me about kind of let's keep an eye on the Twitter feed and see if anything jumps out that we can kind of talk about. And in prep before the show, it turns out we both had the same tweet in mind. And I don't have the word for word. I don't know if you have it. You could
I'm
throw
looking.
it.
I know I shared it, so I'm looking
But it
for it.
was one. I don't even know who put it out, but it was a one championship press release, in announcing a super fight between Anthony Malkin and Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, the the middleweight, light heavyweight, and heavyweight champion of one versus their. I don't even know if he's considered flyweight or bantamweight. Well, I guess it's their flyweight title. Um, but yeah, and it was like a 5-round fight with one round being jiu-jitsu, one round being Muay Thai, one round being MMA, and it
Yeah.
was it was it was like the most over the top thing. But I have to admit, for like like 3 seconds, I was like, oh wow.
Yeah.
And there it is. Breaking open weight mixed rules. Demetrius Johnson versus Anatoly Malkin. Submission grappling round one, Muay Thai round two, MMA round three, kickboxing round four. I should. I don't even think I got to the. This is the first time I even see
Yeah.
capoeira in round five. I think I was like blinded by like dreams by when I saw round 30. I don't even think I saw the last two before realizing, okay, it's April 1. And again, it took about 2 seconds, but it was 2 seconds of euphoria and like, and not so far out of the question for one championship. I feel like it's not. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously,
like that's
it's
something.
extreme.
That's something we feel like before we started recording, we're laughing about it because we're like up until the capoeira is the one that was like, okay, this is the joke, but also just the visual of I mean, and you know what also added to it though, because Mighty Mouse just competed at the Pan Ams or whatever he competed at
Uh huh.
in the open weight bracket, and like placed second, and it was going against guys that were like 250 pounds, and scoring on them. So that kind of added to making this a little believable. But with capoeira, I mean, can you imagine Malakin trying to do capoeira? Like,
No, and you're not going to get a finish in cap. Like none of that's. I mean,
I
I
mean, I know he
suppose you
does
could
cartwheels and
if
shit,
you
but
did all that, but there's not in real capoeira. There's not real contact, right? It's dancing. It's fight
Yeah,
dancing,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
right? Like,
I
I
mean,
mean,
yeah.
there's been guys, Mastre Hulk, and some of the wild dudes from the Valley Tudo days that I used to watch in Brazil.
Yeah,
They would do their dancing around and stuff, but it was very little. Was it? I don't think it ever landed or was ever.
yeah.
Nobody who
Only
fought under the technique of capoeira went very far in the in the no hold bar days of MMA. But
what's the
you
guy that
know,
does all the flips now? That he's always on the undercard of a
oh,
pretty big event.
Bahia.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
That's
okay.
the that's the
That's
closest I think we
that's
can get.
yeah. I mean, but like Genke Sudo kind of used to do that with all of his movements was a little bit of capoeira-esque. Even Anderson Silva um, would kind of break into it occasionally. So, um, and like I said, there was a guy named Mastery Hulk and a couple other guys from the early days that actually had that as their their style
Mhm,
when they were on the for the fight card. But it was mixed rules. It was style versus style was what it was back then. So that was
mhm.
really you repped what you were, and
Yeah, yeah.
even if you mixed it, you repped what your
Before it
roots were.
started rounding out, yeah.
Yeah, yep. Um, so that was kind of funny. Talking about the fights on Saturday,
Mhm.
8 finishes, not
Huh. Kevin Nicholson, what's up? Long time no hear. Chiming in about the what I said about the UFC 302, UFC getting COVID relief cash. Who would have thought that? Yeah, it's New Jersey, man. Boardwalk Empire. That's real stuff that happened. That we never left. Palms get greased left and right in this state. It's why the most expensive exited state in the union. But yeah, back to speaking of New Jersey.
Yep. Speaking of New Jersey, the fight
Yeah,
card this past weekend.
and Boardwalk
Um,
Empire,
yeah. Saw
Atlantic
Manon
City.
Fiorat pick up a dominating unanimous decision over Aaron Blanchfield, which was a surprise to me. Maybe too soon, too early for Blanchfield.
Yeah.
Um, reality, that's probably what it was. And basically that getting thrown to a main event early in your career, early enough in your UFC career
Hmm.
specifically. Uh, and
She had her
did
moments, though. I mean, I got to give credit where credit. And granted, I'm Jersey boy, so I'm gonna always try to stand by the Jersey product. But
she's not going anywhere.
no,
That's the whole point. She's not
and
going anywhere. She's going to be in more main events in her career, and at some point, I don't see any reason to believe that this doesn't make me think that she can't be a champion at some point. It's just might not
no,
be when she's 22 years old or
24, yeah, and and
24.
and
Yeah,
and that's the thing. Like, shout out to Jillian DeCourcy who said that after the results were read. Were like, the good thing is she's young. She hasn't even hit her prime yet, so she's got time to evolve and get better. And I mean, it made me think of, if you look at when Rose Namajunas first got in the UFC, she was like, she didn't win the Ultimate Fighter or whatever the case. I always forget what it was, but she was somebody that was like not even picked for whatever. And look at where she wound up. Look at where she is now. So
I it, yeah, and that's through that's where the things have changed a little bit in the perspective of MMA because there's so many fights that people forget. And you just kind of get
hmm
washed off with, if you get a loss, you get to the back of the line. Now the back of the line's 80 people long, so it seems
yeah,
like you just kind of disappear. But throughout the history of MMA, that's why there's so few undefeated fighters. I always, in my mind, and I'm being an old head like you, I always think of Tito Ortiz versus Frank Shamrock. Because if you now that happened at UFC, I think it was 24.
hmm
Um,
it's a
no, it
great
wasn't. It
fight.
wasn't 24. 2022, I think. Um, 24 was the one where the guy where Pedro Hizo slipped on the pipe in the back, and we ended up with Ted Williams versus Judson for a main event, which most people won't realize is technically a UFC main event. Steve Judson versus uh, Ted Williams. But anyways, so that fight, because going into that fight, everybody kind of thought Tito Ortiz was this, wrestling and how wrestling dominates, and then you all of a sudden have a fighter who's able to avoid the
hmm
takedowns and show the mixed martial arts.
hmm
And so when I think of that a lot, I kind of think of that like, but then Tito went back to the drawing board, and while his style didn't become massively different. He evolved as a fighter, gained
Yeah.
confidence, and was able to eventually win the title in his next fight against Vanderlei Silva,
hmm
of all people. Another guy who then suffers a loss to Tito Ortiz, who's not and Vanderlei Silva at the time is not known by the mass populace. Um, he had lost to Vitor Belfort um, in the UFC, and he was more of a no holds barred guy, but he fought. After winning some of those tournaments in Brazil, he fought Tito, lost. Actually, in Japan they fought, and then the history is written for Vanderlei Silva as he goes into the Hall of Fame
Mhm.
uh, in a couple months here as one of the, if not the greatest light heavyweight, barring John Jones. The greatest from the first 20 years, 25 years of the sport. Um, you know he 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 went on, so everybody has these steps that they miss early in their career. Cyborg has early losses in her career, and I mean, so I don't,
Mhm.
it's far from the end. I just think it's a lesson that we need to remember as MMA fans, is that these people, and it's all sports, we write people
Mhm.
off, we write teams off, and then they rebound the next year. It's the same thing with these people. That she's going to go back to the drawing board. She's got all the tools, she's got great coaches, they're going to fine tune everything. She's going to go back to the drawing board. Maybe she never wins the title, but she's going to have opportunities at it, and it's going to, and she's going to be one of the best in the world. So
Yeah.
that was
And it
that.
was great to have her headline. I mean, it's great to have someone like her that's just come up from, especially someone that I remember riding the train with her. Like, I was going to cover a Bellator event. I remember riding the NJ train
Yeah.
because she trained at Hensel's in NYC. So it was just great to see somebody that's come so long, headline an event, you know, in Atlantic City, in her home state. Not everyone gets to do that. Like not everyone gets to realize their dreams like that. And she lost a decision too. She's not like she got knocked out or whatever. So it was definitely I don't know. There was something really nostalgic about the event. Maybe because of that and Chris Weidman's fight, which we're going to get into. But like, he's somebody that's fought in ACL out with his Ring of Combat. He kind of alluded to it during a fight week in interviews, and I wrote that Lou Neglia documentary that's coming out that I wrote the piece on, that my buddy Pete is a director on, that I have on a couple of podcast episodes back. Um, Weidman is in that documentary as well, talking about the Ring of Combat in Atlantic City, and as there are moments that the UFC is still able to pull on my heartstrings a little, as corporate as they've become and as big as they've become. I found myself enthralled from first bell to the
I
main
I
event.
think a lot of that has to do, and is with it being in front of a live crowd. You mentioned it being in Atlantic
Mhm.
City. With this Apex thing is killing the rising of future stars,
Mhm.
not having events in front of people, because like you said, the nostalgia, the Joaquin Buckley picking up that win, that
Yeah,
fight, he's on the fight poster. I don't know if you saw his reaction to being on the fight poster, but it was really a cool thing to see
yeah,
a dude who was legitimately stoked to see the night before a fight that he was on the
yeah.
fight poster, and he went out there and had a career performance and finished Vicente Luque. But that, look, I was thinking about it earlier today. We talk about how the UFC hasn't developed stars. We've ragged on this for years now, and we can get pushback, and you can read pushback, not necessarily for us, but even just reading other comments in general,
Hmm.
where it goes against kind of our theory. And I just thinking earlier today, the two biggest fights the UFC can make right now, the two biggest fights that people care about, is John Jones, who hasn't fought once in 5 years,
Hmm.
against Stipe Miocic, who's
Hmm.
fought once in 5 years. I mean, give or take a one fight. I mean, we're not far off there. The second
Hmm.
and the other biggest fight is Conor McGregor, who's fought once in 5 years, or won once in five. I don't, roughly once in 5 years, against a guy Chandler, who now is moving on into his second year now of not fighting.
Yeah.
I mean, we're literally in that time span, they haven't developed anybody else that would take their spots. The two biggest fights in the UFC are guys who have a combined like 6 fights in the last 10 years. I mean, it's like it doesn't even. It's it. The 10 years. Between them all, 3 years here, 3 years. I mean, they just
Hmm.
don't have fights, so it
Hmm.
it just shows they haven't been able to develop. They got to get back on the road. They got to get back to this. That's how you create. That's how you create a guy like Matt Brown. Matt Brown got a huge was able to have a career of having what 20ish UFC fights, still fighting in the
Hmm.
UFC, because he fought in front of crowds and he hurt people in front of crowds, and that's what creates a star. When I say star, I mean Matt Brown is Matt Brown, but he's a savage. He's a guy two people tune in to fight. He's a guy who don't miss his fights. He's never going to be a world champion. Probably going to be close to a 500 fighter, but I don't miss his fights because I saw him doing this. It happened at the Apex. I forget about that crap. There's no crowd reaction. You don't have
Mhm.
the guy jumping up on the thing. I know I get sick as anybody of people jumping up on the cage. It became a kind of a cliche thing, but those are the iconic photos that
Yeah,
helped
they're
create these
NFTs
people.
now. Yeah. Yeah.
And they don't have that. So you have guys that literally have fought their whole career on the Apex cards, and unless you go undefeated, you don't come out of those. It doesn't seem like to me. I like maybe I'm missing it, but I just don't see these people that are coming out of that and becoming these mega stars. I know the Contender Series, that's different.
Mhm.
I'm okay with the Contender Series as long as we like don't give
No,
every
Contender
single
Series is
person,
fun. Yeah.
as long as we don't just do it just to add to the roster. Let's do it to find the best fighters. If there's
Mhm.
no good fighters on the card, let's not do it. We don't need to add guys just to add 75 new fighters to the welterweight division. So
Mhm.
um but there's that little rant on that. You mentioned Chris Weidman. Um
Yeah.
I don't even know where to start here. Uh I guess the first start would be mostly prior to this, but in general, Chris Weidman's been one of my favorite fighters. When he came up, I was a fan. I was there when he knocked out Anderson Silva. I was there when he defended against Machida. I mean, the dude ran International Fight Week when it was International Fight Week.
Yeah.
He was the dude. Um, and then there was a couple things through Twitter and signing some stuff for me and some family that was some personal stuff that was really kind of cool on the side. That even just a simple retweet, some stuff like that made me even more of a bigger fan of him. Um, so and then he goes on this terrible run of bad luck and injuries and winning
Oh, that, yeah.
fights against top guys and getting knocked out in the last minutes of fights and you know but at the same time putting on during those fights with Romero and Jacare, them putting on kind of fight of the yearish candidates where they're he looks great and then he just gets blasted and you're like, God
Mhm.
damn, man. So now he comes out Atlantic City this last weekend. um, Physically looks really good, throwing a lot of kicks, which is surprising, and then he wins the fight on a two eye poke combination, probably the best eye poke combination maybe in the history of MMA.
Yeah.
And then follows it up with kind of a dumbass comment that I hate to even say about how you can't turn your back to the ref. And, you know, for the dude who took a knee against Musasi, like you kind of are losing me a little bit there, Chris. I'm glad your name got in the win, but I mean, I don't know how you saw it, but I mean, I was rooting like hell for him. I was ready to jump out of my seat and clap,
Yeah.
something that I don't do very often for fights anymore. And
Yeah. I
it,
was.
it, it was
I
when I
mean,
saw the replay, it was deflating.
yeah. No, I was enjoying watching. I mean, I was like just again the whole nostalgic thing with him and him being in that documentary mentioning Ring of Combat and just seeing him perform like the way he did. Be like you wouldn't have known he would have had that horrific injury when he had it and came back. And I was really liking the way he was looking really good and especially putting that a guy up against the cage that looked like he was going to beat him and then the eye pokes ruin it, man. I'm not gonna lie, the eye pokes do ruin it, and I just kind of like, I usually when I'm watching events, the way that I watch that when I'm commenting between rounds and posting stuff between fights, and I just stayed quiet on that one because it's I mean I think Silva last I heard Silva was gonna try to fight it, and then I know our boy Eric McCracken looked into the way NG New Jersey State Athletic Commission has like I forget what he called it, fighter culpability or something, and it's apparently it's a mess anyway. So what it is, what it is. I mean, he walked away feeling good. I guess the fight game is just not it's not kind. When
Well,
it's mean, it's
I
mean.
don't I don't blame him for walking away feeling good.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
you
of
look
course.
at the results of his last 5 or 6 fights, it's been him getting carried out on stretchers multiple
Hmm.
times. Like
Yeah,
like I'm sure he felt good. Even his Tavares fight, apparently he had a crack in his leg or something. I mean, like I
and
remember he
that's
got his
what.
leg worked
Yeah,
over by Tavares. So
and that's one thing he said in when he talked to the post fight interview one of the backstage interviews. He was just because they asked him about throwing the leg kick. I think they asked him in the cage too, but he was kind of like I did it to just to shake off the fear of love. and that's why he does what he does, and we watch at home. But I mean, still, it's not a cool way to win, and it's just not a
No,
cool way to
no, I
win.
would have much rather seen him say, "Hey, let's rematch this in 2.5
Mhm.
months. Let's go on the June fight card. Let's rematch this in fight week."
He did
You know,
apologize to Silva. I mean, at least he did
oh,
that.
that's fine. It's just and I mean, I'm not knocking Chris other than the fact that it sucks he poked somebody in the eye, and
Yeah,
I wouldn't defend another guy, so I'm not going to defend him. But but what the hell's up with the replay? Like, I'm confused by everything. So I apparently, in hindsight, they ended up going to the cards. But I don't. Did McGracken mention, is that can they go to the cards late? Like, I mean, literally, they
they did.
announced that it
Yeah,
was a
no,
TKO winner. Like, so it wasn't decided at that point because nobody told uh, Bruce Buffer, like, hey, we went to the cards, right? Like, I
yeah,
mean,
no.
they
Well,
spent a
it
lot of
was
time
already
talking.
announced. Yeah, it was already announced, and then they decided after the fact. But I guess I mean,
But yeah, but it seems like it's counterproductive to what
hmm,
the replay system. You have it right there. We all saw it. We all saw it
yeah,
within 5 seconds of it happening. I mean, was there really a question? I mean, like to me, like this was probably had there been a question, I'd be the first one sitting here being like, "Hey, let's just celebrate
yeah,
a
and
5-minute
some
win."
people were faulting that weird looking that Brock Lesnar looking ref that was ref in the fight. He's like the new
Copeland,
yeah he's like the new Yamasaki, but he's like a little he looks like a Barney Rubble, a
I know,
little
I know,
stocky.
I know, I know, but you know, I feel like the instant replay is supposed to be there to help the
It
ref.
is, it
And
is,
it
but
it seems like it didn't at that point. To me, at that
yeah,
point, it should have came back and said, "Hey, um, because it was just bizarre." But it sucks that that's how it had to end. But I'm glad Weidman has all of his limbs
hmm
intact, and hopefully he gets another. He will have another fight. But hopefully, whether it's a rematch with this or he's able to pick up a clean win, and it's
hmm
just looks better. But you know,
yeah,
kind of a weird weird ending. Seems like his career's been cursed since he broke Silva's leg.
yeah, yeah. Pocket, I think I've heard that one too, Kevin. Pocket Hercules for that ref, but yeah. So I mean, I guess that's it for this week, right? I mean, we'll let folks listen to my Pena interview if you want to take us out, Matt.
Yep, definitely listen to the Luis Pena interview after this. Excuse me one second. Fans can check out the show at Combat Hour on Twitter, Coast to Coast Combat Hour on Instagram. Follow me, Matthew Hawkins, on at MMA Hawk 21 on Twitter and Instagram. Follow Edit Carbazol on Twitter, Carbeerzol on Instagram, and Old Head Carb on Twitch. Thanks for the comments, folks. Thanks for listening, everybody. And we look forward to UFC 300 Fight Week next week and a major breakdown show. So have a good night and have a safe week, everyone.
Peace.